The left wing back coverage of the Carlow Football Championships is brought to you in association with Talbot Fitness Carlow, Connolly's Top Line Bagnestown, Scott's Bouncing Castles, J&J Services Tullow, Seamus Byrne Electrical, your number one for pitch floodlighting installation, Milano's Takeaway Bagnestown, PFT Travel, the Arboretum Garden Centre, Ray Whelan Limited, Earth Spas and Carlow Electrical Services. Yes, a very good evening. Welcome along once more to another edition of the Left Wing Back podcast. Firstly, my thanks to Brian Donoghue for filling in last week along with Paul Byrne. Stellar job from Dunzer and from Fisher. We are here to reflect on the quarter-finals of the Carlow Senior, Intermediate, Junior A and Junior B football championships, and we are going to nosedive into the semi-finals all of a sudden. It's week on week, as we know. And it's not been without its fair share of dramas. Probably a little bit lacking in excitement, possibly at times today, although O'Loughlin and Bagnestown did get fairly hairy coming down the home stretch. But yeah, maybe in comparison to other weeks, not quite as exciting. But we have had a lot of moments over the last 3 days to reflect on. And back by popular demand to reflect on them with us is Mr. Mick Kehoe. Mick, how are you doing, sir?
Popular demand, false advertising, I'd say, Kevin.
Well, look, I don't know about that. The feedback was good after the last one anyway, so we'll rock and roll with it. It's a pleasure to have you back on. And I know you had a busy enough weekend as well.
Yeah, loads on this weekend between juvenile sport and a little bit going on in Kilkenny there, and then racing back up for games and things. But look, enjoyable.
Yeah, there's nowhere else you'd rather be, I'd say, is there?
No, absolutely not. No, it'll be over before we know it.
Yeah, and there's worse things you could be asked to do. That's why I keep saying to ourselves, in 2 weeks' time, for me anyway, it'll quieten somewhat. So I'm getting away with that one the last few weeks, Mick. Hopefully we get another two over. Do you know yourself?
Yeah, in a couple of weeks you'll be going back in and trying to reintroduce yourself there. Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah.
yeah. The joys of it, as the fella said. So I'll actually start, Mick, in sequence of how the games kind of panned out. So obviously we were quite busy from a commentary point of view. We did the two Junior A quarterfinals Friday night. We did the intermediate quarterfinals on Saturday. So we'll start with the Junior A. And I have to say, and I'll put a disclaimer out there, and I did in the piece during the week, in terms of the previews, that it was a bit of a minefield in terms of trying to pick winners from a lot of those games. Now, obviously, you end up with a bit of pie in your face the way things transpire, such as life. But I honestly couldn't have foreseen how good Ballon were going to be Friday night. Like, there's no doubting they have talent in their ranks, but they absolutely blew O'Hanrahan's away in the first half. A first half hat-trick from Peter Zarafa. Liam Brennan, absolutely magnificent. Ballon, in general, absolutely magnificent. O'Hanrahan struggled so much, Mick, that Mark Carpenter had to come back inside his own 45. I've never seen it in my life before, just to get some sort of a foothold in the game. And then a bizarre turn of events, I suppose, in the second half, where I think it was in around maybe, say, minute 43 to 46, the Blues get 3 goal chances. They've cut it back to in around 8 or 9 at that stage. So they actually could have been back on parity if those chances are taken. One of them, of course, is a penalty. Danny Thompson just didn't catch it. And then, despite having that poor period in the third quarter, or you can look at the Blues having a very, very good third quarter, Ballon were able to kind of just find their groove a little bit again, and were quite impressive. So, I mean, you know a fair bit about these two teams, Mick. It's an interesting statistic, I think. I'll bring you in on this one, actually. This is the most interesting facet from it. If you were to be told beforehand that 3 of the semi-finalists would come from the group that didn't contain the Fighting Cocks, Tinryland, O'Hanrahan's and Loughlin Bridge, you'd be saying, go on, you're having a laugh. That's how it's unfolded. It's mental.
Well, the first thing to say is that the hallmark of the Junior A in particular, and maybe a little bit less so and even less so at Senior, but it is unpredictable, and teams can really click on a given evening and look really, really very, very good. or it can get away in them. They can lose their way a little bit and fall asunder. The weather is definitely a factor as well. Like we've had some change in conditions in the last couple of weeks there from really chronic heat. You're looking for water breaks, and now you're looking for gloves, and you're looking for anything to try and hold on to a greasy ball. So things really change there. Look, I think a key difference there between Ballon and again, I know Ballon were coming in on the back of a loss, weren't they? Ballon were coming in on the back
Correct.
of a, but I mean, they really clicked. I mean, Peter Zarafa there, he's on the go a good while. He got 3 goals from your. I got that from your feedback on it. Evan Corr, a very good player there. He kicked a couple of points. Fionn McCaffrey, Liam Brennan there, but he scored 6. Is that what he got? Was it
Yeah,
six
5 from
points?
play, I think. Yeah,
There,
yeah.
like you're really going well then. The other thing to say is like, and like this is a kind of a backhanded compliment, really, when you've guys like Mark Carpenter and Barry English and guys like this that are involved, right? Hats off to them. And I mean, they've had unbelievable careers. Mark Carpenter in particular, I mean, he was one of the best in Leinster in his day. Fantastic. But it's probably not a great sign that those guys are playing for the top team in their club. And that's what you're dealing with there with O'Hanrahan's. Like those guys are playing for the top team that they have available in the club. And as good as they are, those guys are more the past than they are the future. And I think they come up against a balanced side that have plenty of youth and plenty of freshness in it. And they obviously got a great first half, maybe lost their way a little bit. But that's not a criticism of the junior grade or of Ballon, because we're actually seeing that in senior games as well. We're
Hmm.
seeing teams that are maybe taking their foot off the pedal and losing their way mid-game. So can happen anyone.
Absolutely. And I mean, if this is the group scenario, I don't believe for a second that if Ballon go out and play the Blues next week, that it ends 4-13 to 110 in favour of Ballon. And
No,
again, that's not a criticism of Ballon. It's the
no.
nature of how these things unfold.
Yeah, it look probably the most like the lower down the grades you go, the more difficult it is to predict with confidence. And you're talking about having egg on your face. Well, like it really could be different on a different evening. And it's just a bounce of a ball, as you said, a penalty going in the back of the net changes the complexion of things completely. Weather conditions, the top teams, you go inter-county, you can predict with fair confidence who's going to come out on top, right? They will follow a pattern and it'll be structured and it'll be consistent. But when you go down the grades, like even into club itself, and then down through the various levels in club, mistakes will be made. Form is fleeting. We'll see when we talk about the senior later on. There's one player in particular I think is really a poster boy for that about how form is temporary but class is permanent. Someone like Ross Dunphy, but yeah, it's just on any given day. That's championship. On any given day,
Mm.
anyone can turn it on.
Yeah, yeah. In relation to the second game Friday night, I've said this a few times since, but there was such a beautiful innocence about how St. Mullins went about their business on Friday, and that's everything. Look, we were having a bit of a actually, we're only having to crack myself and Joe. We were saying, I think Loughlin Bridge probably went out somewhere around, I'm going to say 25 to 8, 20 to 8 for their warm up. And I said to Joe, I'd say St. Mullins boys are probably only going through Boris right now. And in the end, I'd say I wasn't too far out because
Mm.
it was 7 minutes past 8, I think, when St. Mullins came out for the warm up. Loughlin Bridge went in at 5 past 8. Paddy Boland went out, no training top, no tracks bottoms, no nothing. The number 13 on his back through the warm up at 7 minutes past 8 in the pisses are in, wind, everything, you name it. But every one of them walked up, right, with a smile on their face. And it wasn't that they weren't taking it seriously. They were enjoying what they were doing. And I was looking at the body language of the Loughlin lads. And again, this is not really intended to be a criticism, but I suppose at times maybe you can get maybe too serious about it. And I don't know that filter into their play. But when we got onto the field of play and we saw what unfolded, I mean, it was just simple football. There was not really fancy about it. It was the basic skills executed to a pretty high standard considering the conditions. Now, that was in the second half. The first half was garbage. I have to be honest with you. Conditions or no conditions, there was a lot of terrible mistakes, and
It was very low scoring, wasn't it? Was it
I
was it
was it
was
was
it was it 4 points to 1-1 half time?
4 points to 1-1. It
Something like that.
was it wasn't good in the first half. But
Mm.
one crucial moment obviously was when Mouse Kavanagh went off one of these marauding runs, I suppose, halted it just on the 21 because he knew James Doyle was coming off the left shoulder, popped the ball to him. There's the acceleration, there's the goal. And that's simple football smarts. Like that's the type of thing we're kind of talking about. Second half, Boland gets 2 lovely points. He actually won a mark at one stage. and didn't know what the referee was blowing him for. I don't know, did he realise he could have taken the mark, sort of a thing. But they did the simple things right. They're a big, strong side. And the mad thing about it is, right, there's so much pace in the side. They're not actually playing a pace, but they're playing smartly and they're still winning games. And I do believe they're going to be hard stopped.
Yeah, well, I can only assume that for St. Mullins, this is a shot to nothing. Like they are, by all, every measure you could talk about, they're a hurling club, right? Who are
Mm-hmm.
playing a little bit of football. And now they're obviously climbing the grades because clearly any top team like they'd have would be far too good for Junior C. They proved that they were a cut above in Junior B, and now they're obviously in the semi-final in Junior A. And as you said, there must be a huge kind of a fun element to them for them. Like it's I'm turning up to play a match. It's not too serious. There's no major expectation on me. We don't have a long-term football plan, or maybe they do. Maybe I'm being unfair in them, but it certainly would be second fiddle to the hurling. And as you said, it must be a kind of a release. There's probably a kind of a bigger discussion there about the fun in sports. Like I can only imagine from a Loughlin Bridge perspective, and I'd say you're right. You would have more of a handle on it than I would. But there had to be an anxiety, a kind of a desperation or an imperative to get back to a county final, having maybe felt as if they missed the chance last year with a replay. But that anxiety can tie you up, that stress of really feeling we have to do it, and that can weigh heavily on you. And especially if things aren't going to script, if you conceded a couple of goals and this is getting on top of you, you can tighten up mentally, physically, and it's going to be difficult now for Loughlin to try and rise that again because when you're making a bit of progress year on year, it's great. It's that bit easier to pull the boots back on in January and go do a bit of slogging. But like it's going to be a difficult winter for them now. A bit of soul searching to do there, having lost the replay last year, and really giving a good account of themselves. I think they're going to feel like this is a chance missed this year. But
Yeah.
it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Sure is. Yeah, it is indeed, Mick. We have been reliably informed beforehand. Now, this obviously has to get official confirmation, but we're very reliably informed that the Junior A semi-finals will be Friday evening. The intermediate semi-finals will be together on Saturday. I think the first one 3:45. I'm not quite sure which order they're in, and then sometime around 2:15, I think, on Sunday. The first of the senior semi-finals will be on. So, what I'll actually do at this particular juncture, I will go through the draw. So in the Junior B semi-finals, they're actually Sunday as well, I believe. I think they're out in the training centre, possibly. Rathvilly versus Aerogue and Aska versus Clonmore. The Junior A semis Friday night. Fighting Cocks versus Ballin. Now, I'm getting the popcorn for that. Pal versus St. Mullins. Intermediate semi-finals, Aerogue and St. Patrick's, Clonmore and Grange. Senior semi-finals, Rathvilly, Aerogue, Tinryland, Bagnestown. So we will come to the other grades in a moment. We'll stick with Junior A for a minute. I just would like to put on record, I suppose. And do you know what? When I'm putting it on record, I probably should get the exact quote. So in the match report with Ballin and
I know where you're going with this now. Go on, yeah.
I just want to make it perfectly clear. And I said for Ballin, they march on with great confidence and certainly will relish semi-final, particularly if they are drawn against Fighting Cocks. Now, when I say that, I mean that from the point of view of it being a local derby, and regardless of the local derby, you're going to be up for it. I did not genuinely intend anything else other than that. And what do you call it? Billy Fanning is a good friend of the podcast, and I get on fair side with Billy. And I just want to make it clear, I suppose, I didn't mean anything untoward by it. By the same token, I had to have a laugh tongue in cheek. I was like, are you looking for an amalgamation? Is this what we're trying to do?
But it obviously will add. It will add. Look, any semi-final is tense at the best of times, but like this will add another dimension to it, and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be toxic or it doesn't have to be rancorous.
No,
it's
for
just,
sure. For sure.
It's just but it will add a dimension to it. There's no doubt. It's very close neighbours there, and it will add to it. And like it's a derby to a large extent there with O'Loughlin and Bagenalstown today. I mean, all those lads would have gone to Pres de la Salle to school and they'd all know each other very well through other sports and soccer and things like that. It does add attention to it. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a toxic rivalry. There are some toxic rivalries, but you can have. By the way, I think the GA is based on it. That tribalism. So not at all. It should be great.
Yeah, I think so too. And two very interesting semi-finals. Now, Paul have come into this. I didn't expect them to top their group. I'll be quite honest with you. I'm also not really au fait entirely with what their personnel is like.
I,
because I
I
simply have not got to see them.
Same, and I don't like it could be changing. Like again, you go back to the difficulty of trying to predict in the junior grades. Like the personnel can change from match to match, week to week, and a kind of a settled pattern of play or anything it often doesn't happen because there are fellas dipping in and out, or so and so is available this week and not next week. What I will say from Pal's perspective, that I think it's interesting that Pal are in that semi final because clearly the whole focus in the club, I imagine, at adult level is going to be on the predicament they're in at senior. I mean, to go from champions to relegation, like certainly wouldn't have been part of the plan. They must be knocked for six a little bit there. But they'll
Hmm.
also be clinging. They'll be kind of clinging to a bit of a good news story there by being in that semi final, and it'll take on extra significance, I think, because of it. So, like Paul have some very very good players that are maybe finished playing senior or just aren't quite on the senior panel there yet. They'll have lots of talent in that, fellas with maybe with a few senior titles behind them there as well, still togging out. So they'll be formidable, like.
Yeah, for sure. And we won't go into the predictions because we might actually write a piece there later on if we can recover
Well,
from
predicting juniors tough going now. You
Yeah, it
will end
is.
up with
Yeah,
egg in your face. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I tell you, I've a dozen of them, I think, on my face, or at least half a dozen anyway.
Well, you were
After
hot.
the last few days.
You were hot a few weeks ago, so you can't have it everywhere.
That's it. Yeah, blowing hot and
Mm.
cold. That's my biggest problem the whole time, Mick. That's why we
Mm.
never made it
Same,
consistently on the football field.
same, and
Anyway,
no.
the joys of it is you. Intermediate stuff. So I'll ramble on to Saturday, and obviously it was a Jekyll and Hyde sort of afternoon. We had, I suppose, the roller coaster that was Grange and Ballinabranna, 212 Grange, 211 Ballinabranna.
Mm.
And it brought actually a very interesting conversation. Myself, Stephen, and Joe regularly had the conversation, which we had actually on the last podcast when you're on, about spread of scorers versus individual scorer. And at
Mm.
half time, the sides were level. Robert Sanson had scored 2-5 out of 2-6, and Grange had a decent spread at that particular juncture. So, really and truly, it's a case, as we've addressed previously, that you're never happy. You're probably looking for the opposite the whole time, but the final score is the final score, and that's the most important asset. But I would have to say 2-8 in a game of football, playing on one leg, which Samson
Mm.
was, is fair going, number one. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's as good an individual performance as you see anywhere. But to come away on the losing side is gut wrenching from his and Ballinabranna's point of view, I guess. But
Yeah.
it was a really enjoyable game. It was possibly the enjoyable game that I've seen this year, Mick. And I think was it a part of this one you got in for and you got the second one or something like that, was it?
I got in late. I was coming from another game, so I probably
Yeah.
caught the last. If you include the added time, I probably caught the last 15 minutes. But in
Mm.
that, like, there was an awful lot of thrills and spills in it. I mean, there was a sending off. There was a fairly controversial decision off a kick out, where there was a kick out that definitely it didn't clear the D for Ballinabranna, but was allowed play on. Like that was actually a huge moment as well. And that's not criticising. It's just it happened and it wasn't spotted. I think Grange were a bit miffed about that. You had John Murphy missing a free to really provide the insurance score. Remember that one, which again
Mm.
is
Mm.
very unlike him. I mean, John's super reliable off those. But no, in the time that I saw, it had everything. I think Banlarana scored two to level it. Grange went down and got one to take the lead, and then it was really tense and tight after that. But like Grange have brinksmanship like nobody's business. I mean, if it's tight and competitive, Grange like you get nothing easy against them. The physicality, the cuteness, they have unpredictability in the form of someone like Alan Fleming. Like he's a very good player. And I know
Mm.
he's only been in and out for them, or I don't think he's been around to be training. I have a feeling he's working away or somewhere.
Yeah, well,
And
I'll actually jump in on that because I didn't realize this when I was chatting to him after the game yesterday. But I have been reliably informed, I'll use that term again, since that I think he's over in London and he comes back the weekends
I
for the
think you're
games.
right.
Now, that's
Yeah.
some commitment.
Unbelievable. But like again, that's one of the great things about it. Like it's often in places like Grange, the smaller places, like their biggest weakness is their biggest strength. Like they are small, they do have smaller numbers, things are tight. Like I see Peter Clear, who's actually managing slash training, is listed down in the subs there as some of the replacements yesterday. And sure, he wasn't togged out, like, and Peter hasn't togged in a few years now with injuries and just father time. But as you said, the like of that, like Alan Fleming is travelling back and forth there for the cause, and turning up and playing games. So it might be seen as a drawback he hasn't been training, but sure, it's also a huge plus, like, to have that bond and that togetherness. And they will not be easy in a semi-final now. That's their that's their natural habitat, is to be in tight games like that. And I've been up against them a few times in tough games, tight games. They're not an easy out for anybody. You know, they
Hmm.
have the half back line is very strong there. Tom Dillon, Killian Murphy, and Henry Hegarty. I think, like, there's everything you want there. Ned Pender across the half forward line. John Murphy is floating around, still doing the business. Um, and in actual fact, I was only thinking of it about who might win the intermediate championship. If Grange can keep it together as they are doing for the next couple of years, they have three very good current minors who will be stepping up to the plate: Tom Hughes, Harry Nolan, and Aidan Burrows. And, like, their underage performances and so on are fairly positive. The school, I think, is going fairly well. You know, Grange are building for the future there still, even though some lads like John Doyle and John Murphy are coming near the end of it. But I think there's something positive in Grange happening.
Yeah, no, agree wholeheartedly. And obviously, the full commentary is there on playback, and the article is up on the website for a more deep depth look at Grange versus Ballinabana. We'll go on to the second one, and I suppose
Can I
go on.
can I just say
Yeah.
but can I just say before we go on to that, when I came in, I saw Andy Malini was down behind the Bannerbrana goal. Andy Malini, who's down listed as captain, and Andy is
Mm,
a fierce, kind of competitive, kind of a real kind of combative type character, and he was out with a shoulder injury. So in
hmm.
fairness to Bannerbrana, and I saw Colin Byrne only coming on late on as a sub.
Or
He
yeah, so
started and he come back on
yeah, he went off at halftime and came back on near the end. And Gary
yeah
Dunn is another
for
one missing,
for for
obviously.
Samo, I think. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like, anyone would feel the loss of those type of guys now. They are key guys for Bannerbrana. So, like, they lost out by a very tight margin in the end. But I think they'll feel as if, look, they're able to come again, you know?
yeah, for sure. Sham Hegarty probably deserves a shout out. Actually, he made some great saves, as did David Byrne in the first half of Ballinabana. I did not know
Mm.
much about David Byrne. I still don't know much about David Byrne, but I was
Neither do
mightily
I. Big
impressed
lump
with.
of lad. Big physical
Yeah,
presence. Mm.
yeah, I was impressed with his kickouts yesterday, and I was impressed with his shot stopping. He
Mm.
looks a really good keeper. In fairness, second game, I
Mm.
suppose, polar opposite yesterday. St Patrick's, Calavon Donegal. Look, I have to just put it straight out. Calavon Donegal were just dreadful on the day, and they know that themselves. I was chatting with Podge Ryan afterwards. It was one of those days. Nothing went right. I think maybe nothing went right is it harsh or is it accurate? I'm just going to actually rethink on that one on the spot. I mean, in the first quarter, possibly they were doing some things right. It was a close game in the first quarter, and then St. Patrick's. I think they controlled the game anyway, even though it was close from the get go. Making I'll come to you on it now in a moment. But obviously, the crucial moment is the kick out that goes astray, which TJ Kavanagh picks up and proceeds to
Mm.
lob Darren Coleman. And from there, it just genuinely looked like Calavon Donegal were a beaten docket. Didn't recover, obviously, had a little bit
No.
of a late rally, and yeah, I didn't see that margin of victory for St Patrick's, or I didn't see that margin of defeat for our Calavon Donegal is probably the better way of putting it. I'm actually impressed with St Patrick's. I have been since game one. But what did you make of it?
Yeah, well, like, it's actually interesting. As you said, in the first 10 minutes, the first quarter, maybe, competitive game, and it was tight, 2 points apiece, 3 points to two, whatever it was at that stage. The 2 points that Kildavin Donegal got were actually two excellent scores. I think Joe Roberts
Yeah,
got both of them. And
yeah,
they were really confident kicks. Like, I mean, you're
mm,
thinking, geez, listen, and he's dangerous. Like, he did
mm,
a lot of damage versus St. Pat's last year. And the roles were reversed. I think it was 2-8 to 11 points last year, right? But no, Kildavin, and this is not to rub salt in the wounds, but Kildavin Donegal will be disappointed with their performance. They were flat. When they went behind, they didn't really look like coming back into it. And I think they probably went 40 or 45 minutes without a score. After those two early Joe Roberts points, it was very late on until they scored again. And they just couldn't seem to get any kind of rhythm into their play. They had a couple of poor wides. They turned over a lot of ball. Like, they really did turn over a lot of ball that was snaffled up by the like of Rob Gann and Shane Rowan. And those two names are significant. I know we'll talk about, I think Jack Kennedy scored 1-8. TJ Kavanagh had a much more controlled performance than he had the last day against Clonmore. TJ now would have really frustrated me the last day against Clonmore. He was too impetuous on the ball, looking to pick unrealistic passes. I thought his performance in particular now was reflective of a difference between the previous game against Clonmore and this one. TJ was much better in possession. His finish for the goal was fantastic. Like, I've no doubt in my mind he was looking to lob and go for goal. And he was just outside the D, I think. Was it just outside the D?
Mm,
Somewhere
mm,
around
mm,
there.
mm.
And that was a crucial score. Like, that was a real sickener for Kildavin, because it was one day feel as if they'll coughed up cheaply off a poor kick out, you know. And now TJ had a lot to do to finish it, but just from there, then I think it was 1-7 to 2 points at half time. And listen, Jack Kennedy had his shooting boots on. Craig Staunton scored. TJ Kavanagh had scored. A guy who I thought as well now had a big say in an improved performance for Tullow was Keane Dorn. Now
Mm.
Keane's a young guy, and he's not the biggest guy in the world. He had great pace. He was an option off kickouts. He definitely won his duel there at wing back with Gavin Byrne, I think it was. He was marking him. He won frees, and I think he provided an awful lot of impetus that I think Tullow were missing the last day against Clonmore. But you're part of a wider context. Tullow were able to bring in a guy like him, a young, fresh, fit guy with a point to prove. And that's really key when you have games going on week, tiredness, form, being able to bring in a fresh guy that's going to strengthen things. So it's gold dust, you know. But the other thing to say, and I'm not going to harp on too long about Tullow, but I just happen to have a fairly good insight in them over the last couple of years. Um, like a Will Dorn, like Will is really showing up. Like Will and Niall Hickey were in fairly direct contact in the middle of the field. And Niall Hickey is an established county player, a very, very good player around the middle of the field for Carlow. And Will Dorn really, I think he won that battle. He's pacey, he's powerful, he's really tuned in, great pair of hands in the air, and he's adding an awful lot, as is Shane Rowan, who's back from injury, as is Rob Gann, who's back from overseas. So I think Tullow will be approaching that semi-final with real confidence now, but a little bit of a swagger in their play at times there on Saturday.
Yeah, there is indeed, and there was indeed, I should say. So yeah, Aero versus Tullow and Clonmore versus Grange. Now, the
Hmm.
thing, just to come back to Grange for a moment, and we will do the proper predictions a little bit later. But like, if you look at the scope of Grange's three games, so they did lose the first two, but they were competitive in all of them. They narrowly
Yeah,
lost out to Clonmore. They narrowly
yeah.
lost out to St. Patrick's, and then they
Turned it on
saw off
against
Naomh
Wishaw.
Eoin in a very, very, it was a do or die game, plain
Mm.
and simple. So I think we're looking at two interesting semi-finals. Now, no different to just by looking down at the Euro team. That's all I know of them. I can't gauge. I can gauge form in the sense that they went through to a semi-final straight away, but I wouldn't know enough or have seen enough to formulate an opinion. So when we're writing something next week, it's probably blinkered in one sense. I would say, in comparison to, like, your Oaks intermediate team is always a very good intermediate team, and this one looks good too. There seems to be a little bit more on the youthful side, which can be a positive, which can be a negative, of course. Uh, Possibly a game of good pace, because Tullow have that bit of pace about them as well, and two good games in general. Just to be generic, I suppose.
No, there will be. A Rogue have, like, if you factor in someone like Dean Hayden, right? Like, Dean Hayden is big, strong, powerful guy, takes his football very seriously, and probably in any other club, he's probably going to be on the senior team. Like, he's probably going to be on the top team.
Hmm.
But they are obviously sprinkled in. Guys like him are sprinkled in amongst lots of youthful, pacey guys. You're talking about Keelan Brady, a brother of Josh, who togged for the seniors the first day out. Luke Ramsbottom, who was kicking frees, going fairly well. You've got who else there? Tom Bean, another really lively young footballer, nippy kind of a guy. You've also got, let's say, the like of Ronan Quinlan.
Hmm.
Again, lighter, nippier, will be looking for faster ball and trying to be evasive. So, like, I think that's going to be a really good game. Like, both of those teams, Tullow and Éire will be looking to play football. I don't see it being, listen, we're going to try and shut you down, you try and shut us down. I think it could be a shootout, you know. And what I think might sway it in St. Patrick's favour, I think the like of Will Dorn there, he's in really good form. And going back to him again, he will be able to win ball. Craig Staunton will be able to win ball. TJ Kavanagh can win ball. I just have a feeling that Tullow might be able to get their hands on a bit more possession. And sure, very simple metrics: possessions, attacks, shots, scores. But if you're able to get your hands on the ball, like that's a huge part of the puzzle sorted. On the
Hmm.
other side, on the other side, with Clonmore and Grange, like Clonmore are again more on the youthful side. Like you're talking Owen Connolly, Rory Maguire. These are lads really starting to establish themselves for Clonmore. And even fellas that are established for Clonmore, like Oisin Doyle. Like Oisin is a known quantity. He's still a young fella. He's still under 20 this year. So I don't know. Like, I mean, Paddy Hickey, big physical man. John Murphy, big physical guy. Killian Murphy, fine physical fella. Ned Pender, not the biggest man in the world, but established man and adult.
Hmm.
Like I think Grange will try and exploit that kind of seasoned. We'll call them seasoned. That they're maybe that bit more physical, a little bit hardier. But I don't know. Billy Lawler is a young fella there for Clonmore, but he is hardy. He loves a challenge. He won't be shirking anything there. Luke Connolly, another young fella, but seasoned. He'll probably pick up the like of Paddy Hickey or Cathal Bailey. Be intriguing. They're tough to call now. Both of those games are tough to call.
Agreed. So we'll rock on to senior, and I suppose in one sense, like the closeness of Bynderstown and Tinryland should lead me to say, well, it was a very exciting game. I can't really say that and be honest about it. I thought perhaps an exciting finale in the sense that O'Loughlin clawed their way back and we had a
Mm.
close and potentially, well, it wasn't potentially, it was a close finish. It could have been extra time. It wasn't extra time. Bynderstown got that point to give them that little bit of assurance in the game, and they were probably a better side. And we'll come to Aerogan and Rangers in a moment. In general, I don't like being negative, Mick, but I did come away a little bit disappointed by what I saw in Netwatch Cullen Park to a certain extent, in terms of I thought there was actually group games that had more bite than today. Funnily enough, I don't know, there was something about it that it had that kind of a weird atmosphere. I found myself at the first half of Aero and one of the Rangers, which again we'll come to, staring over at a cloud of black smoke. There was something on fire down the town. Hopefully everyone's okay, by the way. But this caught my
Mm.
attention, and I didn't feel like I was missing anything. Um,
No.
Maybe I'm a million miles off of this now, but didn't come away terribly excited. Does that matter to Binders on their rogue? Absolutely not. Do they care about my excitement? Absolutely not. But what did you make of the games yourself?
Well, we'll go first things first. We'll do them in order. Like, was the halftime score in Bagelstone O'Loughlin 3-2? Was that correct? Was it
Yeah,
3-2 at halftime?
yeah.
Well, like obviously 3-2 tells its own story. Like again, possession. Both teams had plenty of possession. I'd say possession was 50-50 or 60-40 maybe for Bagelstown, right? But wayward shooting, some very poor options taken, ball turned over, and it was a case of, right, listen, from O'Loughlin's point of view, whenever Bagenalstown had it, they retreated. Bagenalstown did a lot of the same whenever O'Loughlin advanced forward. And it did take a long time to come to life. The goal for Danny Doyle, which was off a speculative, and actually, right, one of the most interesting things in the first half was I was actually going to give Keen Doyle a ring and see was he singing soprano. Did you see what happened early on there where he got a ball into the nether regions early on? Poor Keen did. He got a wallop off a pass and he wasn't expecting it, shall we say, and he was down with an injury. Like that was one of the most
Didn't actually
exciting.
wax that. Yeah,
Very,
yeah.
very, very well. Next time you're talking to Keane, ask him. I'd say he didn't know whether to rub them or count them, as the saying goes, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
it was uneventful in the first half. I'm trying to think of the things that I was impressed with. Paddy MacDonald kicked at least one lovely free, but he probably had a couple then he was disappointed with. There was one or
Oisin
two other
Dillon.
good score. Oisin, yeah, in the middle of the field, fine big fella. I didn't know much about him, but he impressed me. Did Darren Olin kick one very good point as well, coming
I think
forward?
Dylan and Guider, the two midfielders, well, we're an 8 and 9, we'll say, we'll put it that way. Kicked
Yeah.
good scores. One
Was it
after the other,
Keelan
kind of
Guyder
a
got
thing.
one? I wasn't
Yeah,
sure. It was on the far side over near your side.
they were all in
Um,
identical spots, and Stevie actually made a very good point. I think between at least 2 out of 3 scores. Yeah, 2 out of 3. The 2 scores they got from play, because Paddy Matt did kick that
Paddy
free in the
McDonald
first half,
scored a
as you
free.
said.
Yeah.
So the 2 scores from play, and at least 3, if not 4 wides, all came from the very same spot.
Over near the tunnel, we'll say,
Yeah,
over that side there. Yeah.
yeah.
And you had right-footed kickers kicking from that side of the field, which is tricky. Like, do you drill it? Do you try and draw it in? But it was just uneventful. And from O'Loughlin's point of view, the 2 points was Cathal Coughlin. Did Cathal Coughlin get both of them? Was one from play and one from a free?
I tell you now, Mick, in 2 seconds, we have our little notes on the notometer here. So Mikey Barber kicked the cracker from play, in fairness to him, and Coughlin kicked
Mikey
the
did, I
free.
beg your pardon.
Yeah,
That's right, Mikey Bambrick.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Look, it did come to life in the second half, but it came to life because, I mean, it was a case of do or die for O'Loughlin. They had to come chasing it. The goal for Danny Doyle, which was off a speculative ball in, I think it was Keane Doyle. But it just goes to show the value of a ball in around the house. Like, if there's nothing else on, like, it might be considered a bit agricultural just to lump a ball in around the house, but sure, it works. It often works. And that's where the goal came from. Danny Doyle was alert to it. Um, Bagnallstown had themselves in a great position. Like they looked to be coasting and were six up, if not seven. They were definitely six up. But they kind of invited O'Loughlin onto them. They made changes, which I thought was very good because they brought on real athleticism. Jason Wall came in and
Mm-hmm.
really he got into a kind of a running battle there with Seamus Kinsella. Um, Toss MacDonald came on, older brother of Paddy. And there was three MacDonalds on at the one time: Liam, Paddy, and Toss. Right? They're all very
Mm-hmm.
athletic fellas. But they did lose their way, and they lost their way after kick out, which will be a concern. And the thing that came to my mind then is if you're Tinryland management looking at that, you're kind of going, when O'Loughlin really went after the kick out, they won 5 or 6 in a row and got scores. And maybe they're thinking if we'd gone for that sooner, they might have a little bit of regret on it.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do think is significant as well for O'Loughlin, I said this to you previously, 12 or 13 of those players for O'Loughlin, and a couple of them I think aren't quite fit. Mikey Bambrick concerns me. I don't think he's at full tilt. I think he's kind of minding himself the way he's playing. Those trademark bursting runs weren't there. He played a lot of the game in close to goal, maybe minding his energy and minding himself. Aaron Ammond looked a little bit tired today to me. Like if there was a transfer market going in the GA like you have in soccer, Aaron Ammond would be getting a lot of phone calls. I think he's had a great championship. But it was that's 4 weeks in a row. And in all their games, there was no let up in their games because they had a great comeback against Éire Óg, lost by a goal. Great game to beat Palatine, come out with the win. Lost by a point to Rathvilly, and then chasing down a win there today again, or trying to come back into that game today. And they just didn't have the bench to really give fresh legs in the previous games or to give lads a rest. They need everything from everyone all the time. And I think it caught up with them today in that regard. That said, I thought Sean Taylor that came in, I think he really made a difference when he came on today. He wriggled out of one extremely tight situation to win a free. And I think he won another free then that Cathal Coughlan popped over to make it a 2 point game. But they just didn't have the depth. And I think with that truncated season, the fact that games are week on week, and especially the difficulty they had coming out of that group, I think that caught up with them today. But this is not to be patronising or anything like that. I think O'Loughlin management in general deserve a lot of credit. They were in a group they weren't expected to come out of. They were people's favourites to be in a relegation, right? When you look at the names, the current county champions of Pal, Éire Óg and Rathvilly, they really were seen as the whipping boys in that before the championship started. They gave a great account of themselves in every game. And if there was an award going for the best use of resources available, I think O'Loughlin might get it. Very good off opposition kick out, very good off their own kick out. I think it was just a bridge too far today. And the athleticism of someone like Paddy MacDonald. Imagine being just a little bit tired, a little bit heavy legged, and you have to try and cope with Paddy MacDonald or Robbie Kane or Danny Doyle or Jamie Clark or Shane Clark. They have a lot of athleticism. And I think that's going to be a big concern for Tinryland in a semi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure, man. And I think a couple of other guys, and we'll come to maybe some of the Bagnallstown guys as well, but the position of David Barry today was something that interested me. So for the majority of the game, he was stationed in front of his full back line essentially, because
Yeah.
we know the way like Bagnallstown get their men back and they leave 2 or 3 up, try break quickly. And in a lot of the games this year, they've utilised that direct pass on the counter attack in towards more often than not Robbie Kane, but occasionally Keane Doyle and Danny Doyle actually maybe early in the year too. But I think O'Loughlin probably identified that. Now putting Dave Barnbrick there, I don't know, was it a direct result in Bagnallstown not actually kicking the ball, whether they carried organically, but it did stop them from kicking in the first half for sure. So that's where you could say possibly that worked. And then there was a part of me thinking, it is a catch-22 situation, by the way. Do you lose a lot more then by not having him further out the field and what he can bring? And I suppose when you see the point he kicked in the 47th minute, I don't think Dave Barmbrick's left-footed. I think he's right-footed. He kicked a
No,
cracker
great
off
score.
play.
Great score.
I don't know if it's enough to say that that's how they lost the game or why they lost the game. I don't think that's fair. But it was a notable aspect of it for me. Would you place an importance on it, or good to
No,
see? Yeah,
I know exactly. And again, I was careful. I didn't want to be too close to you at the games today in case it turned into groupthink. But it was interesting
yeah,
all around me in the stand. That was a talking point as well about his positioning and the way they utilised him. Look, I suppose from an O'Loughlin point of view, it was a deterrent. If you see David Bambrick there, big athletic fella, good pair of hands, that it is going to deter you from maybe just lumping ball in because he's obviously going to win more than his fair share of those. But I know what you're saying, that you're then losing that offensive threat or that kind of attacking impetus from having him there. And it was a case of whenever the game was just, look, we have to go for it. And O'Loughlin did go for it. And like they made a really good fist of it. Ty Roach's goal, David Bambrick's point. But it is a sense of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I'd say early on, especially first half, listen, I'd say they're thinking, look, we don't want to lose this game in the first half. We want to make sure that we are in with a shout. And then
mm,
maybe, a kind of full court press. When they went after the kick out and he came forward, like they got a lot of joy.
mm,
Like Ian Atkinson there is a formidable guy in the middle of the field. I know maybe his kind of in possession play could be tightened up a little bit, but I think he can. I think he could really do that. Very competitive, win lots of ball. Mikey Bambrick, Shawnee Bambrick, Ty Roach, Niall Roach, James Dowling is a guy that maybe's gone under the radar a little bit. He was unlucky with one or two wides, but he's a threat. Look,
mm,
I just think O'Loughlin of all teams, I think would really have found it difficult to go 4 weeks on the trot with
mm,
basically virtually all their team playing every minute of every game, you know.
mm,
But
yeah.
yeah, it's a chicken and egg situation with David Bambrick. Do you push him forward and hope for the best and go and try and win the game, or do you keep him back stationed and try not to lose it? It's
Mm,
it's tricky. It's tricky.
yeah. Well, look, I suppose you mentioned him there. I was going to give him a shout. It was Ty Roach. I think he's had a magnificent season in terms of man marking jobs he's done, getting the
Yeah.
ball, carrying it from A to B. And
He scored
another
scored
thing,
another he scored another goal again today.
I was just
Yeah.
going to say that's something he's really added to his game because for
Mm,
years I'd say he wouldn't have even had a shot at goal. And now,
yeah.
what's he got? Has he got three in the championship? I think
He's
definitely
that's
two. And yeah, maybe
there's
three.
two I'm thinking of. Did he score one against Pal? I missed that game.
Yeah,
Did he score
I,
against Pal?
I'm up in the correction. I'll have to go back and check the notes. But Rogue, he either scored one or was involved in one. But he's been
Yeah.
magnificent. So I suppose to switch it
I'm
over to go on. Sorry.
I'm a huge fan of Ty Roach. I would have had
Mm,
Ty a good lot now through the Colts system and up as far as County Minor and things like that. Very good athlete, really great character, really solid character. Like he'd be unflappable generally, I find, like as in Ty is going to turn up and do a job for you. O'Loughlin really needed that attacking impetus from the like of him because, it can't be expected to fall to Seamus Kinsella, to Aaron Ammond, etc. all the time, Carl Coughlin. So they did need that coming from further out the field, like Tig. He's got great pace. He's very solid, very durable fella as well. I'm a big fan of Tig Roach. Big fan of Tig. Himself and Niall are very different. Niall, big lump of guy, give a hit, take a hit, more kind of old school, I would say. Niall is, big lump of fella, but Tig is dynamic, and I think he has a big future.
yeah. A guy that I know you're definitely a big fan of is most of Carlow GA supporters, football and hurling, is Alan Corcoran. He returned
Yes.
for Bidenstown today. Now, unfortunately, I suppose like Alan Corcoran is a Ferrari, always has been a Ferrari. I was just thinking
Mm.
about this a little bit earlier. Now it's getting to the stage there's a Fiat engine going in. And it's not because he's slowing down. Not because he's
Mm.
slowing down. He still has the pace of a Ferrari, but he keeps breaking down, Mick, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So today, I mean, you can tell maybe the last couple of weeks have changed a little bit, but he was hit and miss, not the right way of putting it. The amount of game time he was able to endure during the hurling championship was limited. Now,
Mm.
he missed the game last week, not because of injury, just because of another commitment, I should say. But he is such a key player, and I have no doubt, no different. It's interesting, actually. I think he was picking up Mikey Barber today for spells of the game anyway. The two of those guys, for me, don't look right, and it's obvious
No,
that
they're not.
there is something up. He's such a key player. What it does make for me, when you can get Jack McCullough back out to centre back or out to the half back line, that gives Bynaston such a platform because you have
Yeah.
you have that certainty back there with Alfie. You have Jack then obviously holding the centre, but he's so good going forward. I actually think he's a better footballer than Hurler. Now, it should never become one of these arguments, of course, but he certainly wouldn't look out to play a starting on a Carlow senior football team, in my opinion. The position of
No.
Danny Doyle, it's something that we've touched upon briefly. I mean, you see what he's able to do, where he popped up a lot of the game today at half back. And the other thing about Bynaston, Mick, I felt they're no longer entirely dependent on Jamie Clark, and that is not an
No,
insult to Jamie Clark in any way
it's a good thing.
whatsoever.
It's a compliment. Yeah.
That's
Uh,
the things that I'm seeing with Bynaston that I'm liking is that versatility, that other guys stepping up. We spoke about Dylan and Guider kicking the points. Paddy Max Freeze is something that I keep harping on about, but I cannot believe that we're only seeing this year because he's played for a few years at this point. He is so good at them. Nailed an important one near the end today as well. They
off the
are
post. Yeah.
they are serious contenders going into this game against
Yeah.
Tinryland. I will give them a massive shout in that one, Mick. I don't know about you.
No, absolutely. I happened to bump into Alan. I hadn't seen him, Alfie, in a while on Thursday evening at an under 15 challenge match in Bagenalstown. Tinryland and Bagenalstown played an old challenge game there. I was chatting away to him, and he's, as you said, he is a Ferrari. The problem though with being a Ferrari when you get into your 30s and mid 30s, you see, someone like Alan has that athleticism. He's capable of hurting himself, right? Other lads are slogging away there and they don't really get out of third gear. So it's consistent, but it's not dangerous. Someone like him is capable of tweaking and pulling and doing a bit of damage because he's able to build tension so quickly. He's so athletic. Now he's excellent today, and you're right that him being back there then frees up the like of Jack McCullough to go out and get more involved in the middle third. And Sir Jack popped up with 2 points today, which is probably directly attributable to that freedom from
Yeah.
Alfie that Alfie provides him, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a real thing of someone like Alfie coming in is more than just one change. It does have a bigger impact. In
Yeah.
relation to Bagenalstown themselves, look, I listen. Paddy MacDonald is like, besides the freeze and everything else, his athleticism, his ability to recover situations where it might be a 1v2 or a 2v3, whatever it might be. He'll cover ground like no one's business. He's popping up with a couple of crucial scores. He'll win frees himself because he's so dynamic. You can say the same. Jamie Clark and Shane Clark, besides being such good footballers, are really good athletes. Shane went off today with an injury, and again, I don't know how serious or what it is, but he obviously would be a concern. Like he's vitally important. But then you take someone like Robbie Kane, who I know very well. Like Robbie will relish a tight game. He'll relish a challenge. Robbie is a kind of a confident guy that, like, he wouldn't mind things being tight and close or having a battle on his hands. He'd actually respond well to that. Like I think you're going to get the best out of him if he has a point to prove, or if he thinks he has a bit of a, I mean this in the best possible sense, bit of a chip on the shoulder. You won't stop me. Do you know, that kind of way.
Mm.
And even though he didn't score heavily himself today, he was on a lot of ball and sprayed a lot of ball from the terrace side over to the stand side in particular in the second half. Oh no, Bagenalstown are formidable. But
Yeah.
Tinryland will look at them and think the kick out, when the kick out malfunctioned and they couldn't get possession, like I think O'Loughlin scored 1-2 without reply, and that's really what made it such a tight game in the end for a while. So it's all to play for.
I'm just looking down there here now again, and it's something I intended on making a point of. I just wanted to make sure to be sure first. But if you were told Bynaston were going to win today, scoring 1-9, O'Loughlin obviously got 1-7, and that
Yeah,
Jamie Clark, Robbie Kane, and Keane Doyle wouldn't score.
wouldn't score. Yeah, I thought that.
Like,
No, but that's in stark contrast to Robert Sanson with 2-8, but ends up on the
yes.
losing side. Or let's say if you're Tullow and you're very pleased with your performance, St. Patrick's performance, Jack Kennedy scored 1-8 of their
Mm.
2-10 or 2-11. So it's that in the back of your mind, management will be looking at it going, right, this guy's shooting the lights out, it's great. But what if, And I was saying the same thing when Liam Gavin scored 2-7 out of
Mm.
210. Now Liam has maybe only scored a couple of points since. He certainly hasn't been as prolific as that. But other guys have stepped up. I'd be spinning that as a real positive for Bagenalstown that they didn't have scores from guys who you expect would get them, but they still got over the line and still were for the most part quite comfortable. Their own little mini collapse late on that half will concern them, but it's probably a great way to go into the semi. To be no one getting ahead of themselves.
Yeah. I think it would be safe to say, barring something crazy happens, that if you were told 1917, whatever which way, between Tinryland and Bynaston, it wouldn't be entirely surprising next week.
No,
Nick,
no.
first and foremost, I wouldn't have envisaged it being a high scoring game. Now, what was a high scoring game today? I suppose largely to the Air Oak side rather than Munster Rangers side. 3-13 Air Oak, 2-8 Rangers. Now, 2-8 Rangers is not a shabby scoreline. We're saying in around
No.
that 16-point mark is winning games. And we just literally said a few seconds ago, we're looking at a 1-9 to 1-7 game decided with, 12
Well,
points to 10. So games are different, whatever way you want to put it, I suppose. We can go down all these cliches and throw them out here. But Aero today, now, I know you kind of touched on it earlier, and maybe it's the best place to start. Ross Dunphy, when he's in
hmm.
that type of form, you described it very well the last time. I think it was the best way you could ever put something to someone who was perhaps maybe a little off color. You said, wasn't that his usual level of performance? So that's actually a serious compliment.
Hmm.
And you can describe it as a backhanded one if you wanted, but today he was not just at his usual level of performance. I think he actually raised the bar as well. Is that something you go along with?
Yeah, I think Ross's performances throughout the whole championship so far. I didn't see the Pal Aero game because I was in the grounds, so I couldn't be in two places at once. But I've seen the other games, and I think Ross's performance, or Ross's championship so far, is a rogue in microcosm. It's explains where a rogue are. He could have had against Rathvilly, he could have had 2-3, 2-4, if I remember correctly, right? Um, but he just didn't. And I would say he was looking at the goals, and they probably seemed about that wide, right? Just everything he was looking at. Late on, he tried to steer one over the last day against Rathvilly, I think. He just tried to, please God, go over, right? And actually dropped it short. Now, contrast that today. Sean Gannon, in particular, was targeting him because I think they had Richard Cody picking him up. And, look, Richard Cody has been an unbelievable servant, but, definitely his graph is on the other way going, right? And the last thing you want is in that situation is to be one-on-one with Ross Dunphy. He's immensely strong. He's deceptively strong, right? But he had a couple of marks and a couple of points, relatively easy ones, and I'd say it was manna from heaven for him because it got him into the game. He'd broken his duck early, and the next score he got was from a much tighter angle from a mark, and he had it kicked over the bar so quickly that Patrick Murphy actually brought him back to retake it. Do you remember that? That was retaken.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
what I thought was significant, he wasn't hanging around or I'm going to take my time with this. He just kicked it over the bar. And then he kicked the next one over the bar like he was in the back garden. And the goal he scored was actually very similar to one he missed the previous day, whereby he's on the end line with absolutely nowhere to go. He stops, he jinks, he turns again, goes in, and basically walked it into the net. Do you remember that for the goal? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Ross Dunphy, on top of his game, 1-6, is to be expected. Now, 1-6 is a great score. But earlier in the championship, he was getting all the same ball. He was making the same chances. They just weren't going in the back of the net or going over the bar for him. And that's probably where Airog are. In games, Airog have looked really class, really slick. And in the same games, they've looked pedestrian. And they were a little bit like that today as well. They got into a lead, a 6 or 7 point lead, and they're coasting. And then just sort of seemed to take their foot off the pedal and just were sloppy. And that's not to discount the work that Rangers were doing. Like Rangers make it difficult for you anytime. I mean, Eddie Byrne and Cormac Mullins and everything were having a bit of a battle in front of us and just making it awkward. But like the goal that they conceded as well, I know Rangers conceded a poor goal. It was unlucky. Darrell O'Brien ran through and it ended up being an OG, I think. But Johnny Fury would have conceded one on his near post. that you would think, on another, like he probably shouldn't let that in, and they probably let a couple of kickouts go astray. But I still think Aoróg aren't maybe quite sure of what's their best team, who's in the best position and where. Paul McGilligan came in and looked quite assured. Cormac Mullins came on and I think probably had a score again fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Ross Dunphy clicked, but like Colin Hulton probably chipped in with 1-1 or 1-2 as well, did he, early
Yeah,
on?
1-1. Yeah, yeah.
1-1. I don't know. If if Aoróg can put on a 60-minute performance, Jordan Morrissey back is another huge plus. I mean, he chipped in with a couple of nice points and he's always going to win you ball and take watching. If Aoróg click, I think they're capable of blowing teams away, but they just haven't found their groove yet. That's how I describe it. They're just not seem to be in the groove, but they're in a
Mm,
semi-final. But they're in a
yeah.
semi-final.
They'll be happy enough to be looking for it in a semi-final as to
Oh,
looking
for
for it
sure.
knocked out, says
Yeah,
you.
and
Yeah.
and and scoring 313.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So from a Rangers point of view, Chris Nolan got his red card overturned, got to
yeah,
play the game. But he scored 1-1. Actually, I don't know how Johnny Fiore is. I think I don't want to be misquoting you there, but probably will be disappointed. I'll put it that way anyway. If you haven't put it directly like that, to
yeah,
concede the goal from Chris Nolan, probably shouldn't have went in.
just on
Being
his near
brutally
on
honest
his
about
near
it.
on his near post there, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
He'd probably look
yeah,
back at it and think, I wish that didn't happen. Yeah,
yeah, for sure. I suppose the goal they got in the first half came from,
Ted
you
Joyce.
know, yeah, there was a break. I think was Chris Nolan fouled. I think Chris Nolan might have been fouled. And do you know what? I'll come to something indirect. He gets up, takes a quick free, spots Ted Choice, who's also a few yards further in on goal, and he slotted it away. I think by taking that free quickly, he saved Owen Byrne from getting either a black or a yellow card because it
Right.
was a
Well,
stonewall cynical foul.
I have to be really honest here. I was kind of glad to hear your black smoke down the town story that you got distracted because the exact same thing happened me for that goal. Like
Yeah.
at that period in the game, Rogue were starting to stretch the legs and were getting on top. They'd been fairly dominant, and I actually turned away. Someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I missed that goal. I saw it just about going in the back of the net, but I missed the build up to it. But I
Yeah.
think it's kind of like your situation. The game was starting to peter out at that even at that early stage, and that
Mm,
goal livened things up again. But
yeah. Yeah. And short lived, unfortunately, because I think that was in the 40th minute, and then Hulton gets the goal a couple minutes
yeah,
later. And
it
like you
it
could
just took the
nearly,
good over it for them. It just took the
yeah,
good over it for them. Yeah, yeah.
it really did.
Um,
Now, what Aero did do, which not many teams have done this year, is lined out near enough, I think, if not entirely, as selected on the program, which I thought was
yeah.
which I thought was quite interesting. Rangers
I
probably, to their credit, made one change in personnel, which isn't and wasn't too bad. But I guess
Tim,
to a stage, I actually have it
was
here, and maybe
only Tim
I'll
Brennan. Only Tim Brennan, I think, was in or was changed.
yeah.
Was it?
So Chris Nolan came in, and then there was a few positional changes as a result. But I
Yeah.
think Aero positions and all lined out. So this is what we're resorting to now, which I don't know if people can make out, but we have
Well,
initials. I'm actually just thoughting it out that way because
do
it's
you know the
crazy
way?
otherwise.
Well, do you know that like obviously there's people that still do collect programs for big games or just like to have it as a record or a kind of an artifact of games from years ago. They're fairly meaningless now because even if
Mm,
the teams never start as they are. Like I can't remember when a team lined out
mm,
exactly as was in the program. But even positions, like the game is so fluid now. Like the idea of someone being an imposing full back and that's where they play, or someone being an out and out corner forward, it's gone. So bar you're at the game and bar you see things with your own eyes or you see footage, like programs, they're great to have and you need to have them and sure they are still helpful, but they don't bear relation to what's actually happening on the pitch anymore.
mm,
Positions, personnel, it's not going to be as useful as they were years ago looking back on things. It just won't
yeah.
be indicative of what happens.
Brian Donoghue asked me about Rangers a couple of weeks ago. Are they the most dangerous team in the championship? And you know the description I used, I'm sure, but it's proven correct again. They have
Uh,
they've let the neutrals down or whatever. But you know, I used the term infuriating before, and I don't think it's I don't think it's unfair to suggest that, but they're an awful team to go through the motions at times, and they have
um,
serious quality. And I do wish at some stage they push on because as we said, we have that bit of quality. Like, I suppose they're heavily dependent on someone who is still a chap. I think Fitzpatrick is still a chap,
Yeah,
and probably
Dunham
in the game
Murphy.
probably in the game a little bit more today, Fikra, but by and large, in the last two, hasn't been as prominent as maybe previous times. Donna Murphy, and again, very, very conscious because of the age and pressure and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Donna Murphy, for me, put in the best individual performance I have ever seen in a minor football final. I
yeah,
don't remember anyone
yeah.
scoring 9 or 10 points from midfield, from play.
Hmm.
And you can see flashes of brilliance in his senior performances, which, again, by admission, he is still only a kid.
Yeah.
They need those guys 8 out of 10 performances every day, at least, because they are that
They,
good, you know?
they do, and I look like I don't disagree with anything you're saying there. The kind of counterpoint I'll offer to you is that Rangers have already played and won a championship, and
Mm,
I know we're on the football podcast and the football part of the season now, but if I'm going to maybe address the fact that O'Loughlin have been out 4 weeks in a row with virtually the same personnel all the time in all tough competitive games. I suppose from a Rangers point of view, they've had all their hurling season and then come into the football season. Now, I don't dispute your point. They have
mm,
lots and lots of really good footballers. Eddie Byrne was a very good underage footballer there with Carlow and under 21 and that kind of thing, right? Kevin MacDonald, I think, were he to focus on football, has all the attributes. Great game sense, big athletic fella, good football skills. Donna Murphy, you've mentioned. Fiacre Fitzpatrick, an obvious one. Um, Diarmaid Byrne, if he catches the ball, like, I mean, whether off the ground or from his hands, like, he's well able to play football. And we could keep going on here. Suppose the thing is, any Rangers person will look at it and go, that's grand, Kevin. I'll take that from you. Tell me how much hurling is going on in Éire Óg. Tell me how much
yeah,
hurling is going on in Tinryland. So I see where you're coming from. I would lament it as well a little bit. I think that they have more in their tank than they're showing. But I suppose it just isn't the priority, and that's that. The priority is hurling, and that's the way it is. And I suppose they'd say, aren't we doing very well in a championship that's very much second fiddle to us? Same
mm,
as St Mullins. Same as St Mullins in that regard.
yeah,
Um, in that regard, just to mention the point, Bagenalstown Gales are like they're really pushing in hurling and football, and it's probably a matter of time with the age profile and with the numbers that they have. It's probably a matter of time until they are claiming championships in either. So it's possible, but it's not easy. Put it
mm.
that way.
Now, this is a complete tongue-in-cheek comment, so I don't want anyone to take any offence, but I was looking at Jack Murphy today, and I was thinking, it's a bit like the 2023 Senior Football League final. He was on, he was off. He was
Off.
back on, he was off.
Yeah, I,
Um,
I was I was following that because he had kicked a good point in the first half, right? I thought he had
he's
started quite
injured, by the
well.
way, just put out there. Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah,
no, I
yeah.
didn't know that, but he had kicked a good point, right? And I'm fairly sure he did, didn't he?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
then he came over for a fairly lengthy discussion with management right in front of us at the stand, and then he was off, and then he was back on, and he was heavily strapped up going back on. So like that's obviously very difficult. Like if you're trying to do that, he had started well, was on a bit of ball, and kicked a good score, came off, clearly an injury of some description, but then back in again. Like that's obviously very, very challenging. And I think, like in terms of injury, Sean Gannon kicked the ball out over his shoulder. Typical Gannon, eyes in the back of his head or the side of his head anyway, late on. And he kicked the ball out over his shoulder into space up the left half forward position. But I was watching him and he pulled up virtually immediately and basically stopped moving for that and then went off with an ice pack on it. And Sean Gannon, if you're Rathvilly, like they would be licking their lips at the idea that Sean Gannon may or may not be available. And I'm not preempting it, but I thought that was significant. The game was more or less over. I didn't see Rangers coming back into it or getting the win. It didn't have a threat. It didn't look to me like a threat of Rangers are actually going to go back into this game, even though they made a good fist of it. But Gannon, of all players, for Éire Óg, he's still a talisman, if you want to use
mm,
that term. He still makes things tick. I think he probably had it in his head. I'm going to put ball into Ross Dunphy here today and get this guy firing. It's probably, I presume it was organised, but Gannon's that kind of guy. He can get more out of fellas around him. But from
mm.
an injury perspective, is Sean 35 now? Is he 35, 36?
Yeah, I think a minor in
I
'06,
had him.
so
I had him
35.
in.
Yeah, 36,
I
yeah.
had him. I had him in school, so I don't like even thinking about that, because what does that say about me? But he's playing a long time with a lot of miles on the clock, right? He's a 36-year vintage, but he has a lot of miles on the clock with lots of football played. I'm interested to see what way he is now for a semi-final with Rathvilly, because he will still take a lot of their attention. I hope he's fit from his own point of view.
Yeah, and another one in that regard, Benny Kavanagh, I guess. Because I think he made
Same.
way after 30, 33 minutes. Now, just on that point, I suppose, we'll move on to Rathvilly and Rogue, and I am conscious of the time. These podcasts do get a bit longer as championships go on, and thank you very much for being so good with your time. I really do appreciate that, and that's not to sound patronising or condescending or any of those terms. But on that note, Mick, looking at that Rogue full back line, it's not plentiful in terms of size. You spoke about high balls earlier. Is that somewhere Rathvilly be looking to straight away? It's probably somewhere I might be looking at if I was Rathvilly.
The last game, you had a strange, unusual situation of you had number 8 on number 8 in front of the goal. You had Mark Fury wrestling a good bit there with Brendan Murphy in front of the goal for long periods, and that's clearly dealing with that threat. Like, as in, that's a specific ploy for them to deal with that. It's like we said with David Bambrick. If you're putting Fury back in there, a Rogue will probably be happy to sacrifice him doing that, because they have personnel to fill in out the field. But it would be a concern, I'd say. Yeah, I think it will be a concern for them, and it's just not settled. Like Benny Kavanagh went off. Benny Kavanagh needs no introduction. Like, really excellent player going forward, defending, has it all. But again, he's not in the first flush of youth either. And this is where I keep going back to it. Games week on week. Rathvilly have had the benefit now of that week off. Freshen up, change the training a little bit, just maybe take the foot off the pedal, even mentally, even concentration wise. Whereas a Rogue had to go out and try and find form today. There's the potential of a couple of injuries in it. Paul McGilligan came in and did very well for what he had to do for a Rogue, but it just isn't settled. That's my thing with a Rogue. They just don't seem to be in a groove. I keep going back to that. And of all teams to test you, like Alan Kelly, to test you and pump in a high ball in on the square, Brendan Murphy to be in there, the like of Brian Murphy to come in off the line. Like, obviously, Rathvilly will be a totally different proposition than Rangers were today. Like, these are tough to call now. These are tough to. The more I think of them, these are really, really tight games to call. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before a ball was kicked, Rathvilly were 5-1 to win the championship, and Rogue were not. I think they were odds-on favourites actually with some of the bookmakers, but definitely
Rathvilly were 5-1 to win the championship. Yes. I don't know. Like, I've never put a bet on in my life, right? Thanks be to God. But 5-1 for Rathvilly
before a ball was kicked in the championship. Yeah.
Well,
so now they're favourites as we speak. They are going to favourites, and Rogue are next, pretty close to them, obviously. From what I saw Rathvilly last week, I didn't see Rathvilly at their absolute best last week. That's the first thing I have to say. I seen glimpses of absolute brilliance and excellence, but I don't know if it was their best performance this year, going on what I've been told. But from what I saw stuff that you can only be impressed by. But I also saw complacency last week against the All Auckland, that game, Mick. And Brian Donoghue has said it several times that shot selection is an issue. They fell into that trap last week. If they start falling into that next week, and I do believe that a Rogue will probably make things a bit more compact, knowing that that's somewhere where they could sucker them. They have guys that can kick from range. We know Brendan Murphy can kick from range. Alan Kelly is not bad from range either, mind you. But there's other guys, unfortunately, think they're Brendan Murphy or Alan Kelly on occasion, and they're percentage shots for them. So that's something that they may have to be aware of. I do agree with you. I think it's an incredibly difficult contest to call. I think both of the games are, to be quite honest.
I think Rathvilly and Rogue in particular are going to bring out the best in each other. I think Rathvilly can dominate games, but they often play to the level of the opposition. That's maybe I'll be shot for saying this now, but I often find with Rathvilly in particular, they can play to the level of the opposition. They can kind of do what's required, right? But they've been fairly consistent in their scoring. 2-10 the first day versus Pal, even though I know it came late. 2-10, 16 points. 16-14 versus Aero. So again, 16 points. What was the score last day? Was it 15-1-12 or something?
I think it was
15-1-11.
15 to 111. I think it was. Yeah, yeah.
So like they've scored 2, 10, 16, and 15 points, right? And now they could have had a good lot more against they could have had
O'Loughlin.
a good lot more against O'Loughlin. The two players that I think that I again to talk about maybe guys that go under the radar a small bit. Brandon Kelly is a player I love watching, right? I really enjoy watching Brandon Kelly. He's a schemer. He doesn't fit your prototype image that you have these days of Gaelic footballers that are 6 foot and 80 kg, chest out to here. He's impish, he's cheeky, he looks for things that aren't necessarily conventional. He'll see a pass that maybe someone else doesn't see. He'll get up to mischief, he'll chip in with a score. I think his performance against Éire Óg is going to be key in how Éire Óg deal with him. And the other guy he's still a young man, a guy I have a lot of experience of from underage and things like that, Conor Doyle.
Mm.
Connor is as honest as the day is long. He's a brilliant athlete. He is a great competitor. I don't think he chips in with enough scores that his play deserves or that his play should warrant. He can kick an unbelievable score, but he can also maybe balloon one sky high or balloon it wide. And I think the Brendan Murphy factor and the Brian Murphy factor and these guys, they're known quantities, and I think they're going to turn up. Those guys never don't turn up. But I
Hmm.
think it's going to be the like of Brandon Kelly, the like of Conor Doyle, and is it possible for Liam Gavin to put on the shooting boots like he did the first day, 2-7? So I think those guys are going to be key.
Yep, absolutely. Mick, anything else to add before we wrap it up?
No, look, really, we're down to the business end of it now. All teams would have been thinking, look, let's just get to a semi-final, and it takes on a life of its own. I think I'm really looking forward to guys like I mentioned, Brandon Kelly coming under the radar a bit, Cormac O'Brien, Killian Fagan with Tinryland, Maurice Lawler is starting to chip in with a few scores. It's going to be exciting. Looking forward to it.
Sure is. Mick, thanks a million for your contribution to the programme again. Really, really enjoyed the chat, and best luck with all the teams that you're involved with. You're great. You're one of the few lads that is involved with several teams still this late into the year. So keep the
It's late
test
into
out
the
there
year.
and keep beating it there.
Well, well. The one thing I just wanted to say this now as well. It was a good day for the Clarks in general of Bagenalstown because Kyle Clark, a young fella, refereed an under-13 game this morning, Tinryland and Asca, and did a brilliant job on it. I thought he was really, really assured and really good. And it's great to see young fellas getting involved in refereeing. We need them.
We do indeed, for sure. More than any other county, I think, by sheer weight
For
of numbers.
sure.
Mick, much appreciated. Thanks a million. Take care.
Thanks,